Hey, it's Ivan from the EV Stock Channel here. Are we going to be seeing an Australian Terafactory in the next few years? In this episode, we examine the possibility by looking at Australia's proximity to key battery raw materials, the Australian government and automotive expertise, and the size of Australia's auto market to see if this makes sense. So let's dive in. First of all, Australia is one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, containing almost all the key materials needed to manufacture batteries and electric vehicles. Here's how Australia ranks on a global level in the production of raw materials. 5th in nickel production, 1st in lithium, 3rd in cobalt, 2nd in iron, but unfortunately, way outside of the top 10 for graphite production. Moving on, 5th in manganese, 6th in aluminum, 6th in copper, and 4th in neodymium, which are critical components for the motors. So on the surface, this looks quite compelling, and you may be thinking Australia just needs to mine the raw materials and ship them to the factory. Unfortunately for Australia, it's not enough to just have the raw materials and the mining expertise. You also need the processing plants. Otherwise, if you mine nickel, cobalt, and aluminum, you still have to ship them to a cathode plant such as Sumitomo in Japan to make the cathode and then ship it back to Australia, which completely defeats the purpose of building the cars and batteries in close proximity to the resources. What about lithium? Again, Australia is one of the world's largest supplier in that area. They mine spodumene, which are rocks containing lithium, but again, Australia mines these rocks and then sends them to China for processing to convert them to lithium hydroxide, which means you're shipping to China and back. Although this could be changing as US lithium giant Albemarle is building a 50,000 tonne processing plant in Kemerton, Western Australia, due to be completed in a year or two, while Chinese lithium company Tianqi started building a conversion plant to convert 24,000 tonnes of lithium hydroxide in Kwinana, Western Australia. But unfortunately for Tianqi, they've hit major cost overruns while at the same time facing major financial stress due to their high debt loads. Now, I haven't looked into this, but it is possible that Tesla could try and buy out a conversion facility on the cheap if Tianqi is forced to sell at a low price, which would mean Tesla would have the conversion facility in close proximity to the lithium mine. As a Patreon bonus story, I'll be sharing a lot more about this topic as I interviewed Howard Klein from RK Equity. Anyway, in summary, Australia has the resources and mining expertise, but what's going to be holding them back is the processing infrastructure. The mines cannot be moved, but the processing plants can be built. Next up, the Australian government. In simple terms, anti-EV, pro-coal. Here's Australia's Prime Minister, Scott Morrison.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
The Treasurer knows the rule on crops.
It's coal. It was dug up. Those opposite have an ideological, pathological fear of coal. There's no word for coalophobia officially, Mr. Speaker.
Here, Scott Morrison talks about electric vehicles.
And I'll tell you what, it's not going to tow your trailer. It's not going to tow your boat. It's not going to get you out to your favourite camping spot with your family. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to tow your trailer. It's not going to tow your boat.
Here are his thoughts on Tesla's battery that solved South Australia's power shortages.
By all means, have the world's biggest battery, have the world's biggest banana, have the world's biggest prawn. But that's not solving the problem.
This guy is not going to roll out the red carpet for Tesla, but governments change, and it's possible that they could see the economic benefit to reviving Australia's auto industry. Speaking of which, Ford, Toyota and GM subsidiary Holden had factories in Adelaide and Melbourne. But in 2017, this is what happened.
This XR6 Falcon will be the last Ford made in Australia. Fittingly, instead of going to a showroom, it'll go to a museum. The future is less certain for 600 workers about to lose their jobs, 400 in Broadmeadows and 200 in Geelong.
The end of an industry. The last Toyota Camry rolled off the production line at midday, destined for a museum in Japan. Minutes later, 2,500 workers walked out for the last time.
The last of 7.6 million Australian-built Holdens comes to the end of the line. A V8 engine sounding the death knell for the car-making industry and the end of a career for 955 employees.
Just to point out, the locations of these factories were Adelaide, Geelong and Melbourne, while the majority of the raw materials are located in Western Australia. Now, just how big is Australia's auto market? Well, in 2019, just over 1 million new cars were sold, which in comparison is about half of that of the UK and Canadian markets. The two top selling vehicles in Australia are the Toyota Hilux and the Ford Ranger. You may call these pickup trucks, but in Australia they're called utes. And they're super popular, which means there should be a strong market for the Cybertruck to go along with the Model 3 and Model Y. Not to mention, the semi-truck would also be a great idea to avoid shipping these massive vehicles from one side of the world to the other. So there you have it. Australia is not the largest auto market, but it doesn't have to be, as Australia could also supply vehicles to New Zealand, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, even the Middle East. The other thing to note is, Australia really needs Tesla. EV adoption is ridiculously low down under. I mean, during a 30-minute drive, you may see one Tesla, maybe two if you're lucky. They are a rare sight, and the main reason for that is price. For a Model 3 Standard Range Plus, you're looking at around 79,500 Australian dollars. In comparison, a Toyota Corolla starts at 23,900, which is 1/3 the cost. Meanwhile, the lowest cost Model S will set you back about $150,000. So in other words, Teslas are not even an option for most Aussies. So there you have it. Australia does have the raw materials and auto workers to make this happen, but at the same time, there are challenges that would need to be solved before making this a possibility. And by the way, one of the reasons I made this episode was because you guys requested it in the comments many times over. So let me know what you guys think, and I look forward to reading all of your comments. On a final note, thank you to all the Patreons that make these episodes possible, and a huge shout out to Stefan, Riley, Bill, Andrew, Patrick, Chensali, Rob, and Hanan. And always, all content in this video is my opinion only and not financial advice. So till next time, I'll see you guys soon.